Hello and welcome to Downforce Debrief. I am your co-host GB. Unfortunately, joined with me again is Alex Gillen. Alex, how are you feeling?
Wait, did you say unfortunately? As far as shots
we're
from the
only on
first few seconds of the podcast. What is this?
We're on episode 2. We've already got the drama going. But no, this is the place where you can obviously catch all things Formula One with some other things thrown into the mix as well. We've got some spicy talking points for you guys today. And we're going to start with Flexiwings. Alex, you've been looking into Flexiwings, the changes that are coming in halfway into 2025. Do you want to talk us through that?
Yes, I've been doing a bit of research for a YouTube video on this, and it's caught me by surprise a little bit. So basically, we're going to get a bit of not a two-tier season, but like a split season. So basically, the FIA have decided to introduce a clampdown on flexi front wings for the Spanish Grand Prix onwards. Now, the Spanish Grand Prix is the 9th race of the season, so it means we're going to get the first third of the season with flexi wings being allowed, as they were last season. Then we're going to have the second 2/3 of the season with flexi wings not banned, but certainly cracked down on. I think they're reducing the flex by something like half or a third or something like that, but it's going to be quite a big difference. So you may recall last year, particularly Ferrari and Red Bull were querying it because, do you know 3 teams that introduced flexi wings last season? McLaren, Mercedes, and Alpine. 3 teams that made pretty big jumps, I think it's fair to say, in 2024. Now, that's not to say Flexiwings are the silver bullet, because it's not like Alpine were, they did get a double podium, but it's not like they were suddenly, winning races like McLaren were. But clearly, they're worth a bit of time. Just to go into a bit more detail on that, so the wings, the flexi wings, what it does is they're literally bending at high speed. Everything obviously bends with the amount of drag they're producing at high speeds, but flexi wings in particular, they just basically balance the car a lot better. So where by default, the regulations have the balance a little bit off. So in slow speed corners, you might have some understeer, but then high speed corners, you'd have some oversteer. Flexi wings basically allow you to effectively run what would effectively be a higher wing level in slow speed corner, so to get rid of understeer, and then effectively a lower wing angle in high speed corners to get rid of some oversteer. So it's basically a balance aid, but it's clearly been pretty useful. And I'm honestly really surprised that FIA have decided to get rid of this from race 9. I mean, especially in a season where it's the last season of a current rule set, all the teams are going to want to be devoting resources to next season. But they're going to have to cut a cut, particularly, a team like McLaren that have gone down this flexi wings route. They're going to have to be putting resources in building another wing that's going to work differently. And, how's this going to work? Are we going to have almost, I guess, what we ended up having last year, where a certain team or a couple of teams are really quick over the first 8 races of the season, and then the remaining 18 races of the season, there's going to be completely different teams that are quicker? Is this also going to affect their preparation for 2026? It's honestly, I'm really surprised that FIA have chosen to do this. I think last season of a rule set, I think they just need to decide one way or the other. This has only come out a couple of weeks ago to us. I'm sure the teams have heard a little bit before that. I'm sure they heard some rumblings and stuff. I'm sure it's not caught them quite by surprise so much. But yeah, I don't know. Does that all make sense, GB? Do you kind of understand the Flexiwings now? And are you as surprised as me why they've decided to do it mid-season?
I think, to be honest, that was going to be another question I was going to ask, because I have actually not seen this publication. So you saying this now is news to me for the first time. So I find it really interesting that they are doing this mid-season, and I don't really understand the motive behind it. I haven't seen if they've published a reason why they are actually making that change. But I will say, it does kind of cast my mind back to 2021, back when they changed, I might get this mixed up the wrong way around, but the high rake cars to the low rake, which obviously then favoured Red Bull and any other car, effectively just didn't favour Mercedes at the time, and brought that front pack a little bit closer together, Red Bull, Mercedes. And we all know what season we got in 2021. So kind of, it's throwing a cliche into the mix, but I do wonder, is that going to potentially have a similar effect where, yeah, as you say, if a McLaren, for example, have made major gains on their flexi wing in the first 9 races, does that then mean that, that's going to potentially change up the pecking order halfway through the season? But I suppose back to the original point, has the FIA stated why they're actually making this change?
Not really. I think it's just a clamp down on the practice. I mean, teams aren't supposed to design wings to flex. It's sort of movable aero. It's definitely a bit of a grey area. but equally they're doing over 300 kilometers an hour. Like, can you even imagine putting your hand out the window at 300 kilometers an hour? It's enough when you're doing 100 kilometers an hour, 60 miles an hour. So there's always going to be some flex there. So, but you're not supposed to design wings to flex. They did speak about this last year, and Ferrari and Red Bull were lobbying for it to be banned because they were effectively behind the curve on it. And basically, the FIA in the end ended up saying, "Nah, we think it's all right. We're going to leave it." Do you remember actually I think it was Spa last year, they introduced dots on the wing. Do you remember this? They mandated all teams have to put dots on the wing, and the reason being was that was a flex test. So they had cameras looking at it, and obviously when there's dots, you can perfectly measure how much it's flexing or not. So that they were looking at it from middle of last year, and they basically decided to not do anything about it, and they've obviously changed their minds, which, like, if it wasn't for a rule change in 2026, I'd be like, okay, fair enough, bit weird to do it mid-season when you could have done it from the start of the season, but whatever. And that to me says it has to have been a decision that was made relatively late in the day, otherwise they'd have done it from the start of the season, surely. So as I said, they haven't really released a reason as such. It's just a clamp down on the practice that they don't like to see. And as I said, hopefully the teams have been a bit more clued up than we have, because if they didn't find out till a couple of weeks ago as well, they'd be in trouble. But there's also a reason they've given them 9 races to do it. So it must have been a late decision regardless. And I mean, in theory, anyone who's got a good flexi wing has to now design a wing that's not going to flex, which will eat into their 2026 preparations. So, I mean, if someone like Ferrari maybe hasn't bothered with a flexi wing at all, this could give them quite a big advantage, both in 2/3 of this season and in 2026. So I don't know, it's really quite a big decision. I mean, look, wings aren't the be all and end all. As I said, Alpine put on a flexi wing, they didn't suddenly start winning races. So it's not like it's a magic trick to get to the front. There is no silver bullets in F1, but it is a big change. And the FIA haven't given a direct reason other than they just don't like the practice. I'm just surprised they've left it so late, honestly.
Yes, on face value, it is interesting. I don't understand the timing, and I guess maybe when more comes out and we start seeing race weekends progress and maybe getting the insight of some team members in various interviews, maybe we'll find out more. But it does seem strange. I don't know why they've announced that from race 9.
I mean, to be fair, we might end up being grateful for it. If, like, McLaren dominates with a flexi wing the first 9 races, might be like, okay. And then in Spain onwards, just like we saw last year with Red Bull dominating the start, Miami suddenly McLaren's in it. If we see that, we'll actually be grateful for it. But equally, we might have a really good championship the first 8 races, and then in the 9th, it might all go wrong. So, I guess we're just repeating ourselves now, but it's just going to be weird. And just look, don't be surprised if the pecking order changes from Spain.
Yeah, and look, on the note of McLaren, we've obviously had McLaren in the news this week. McLaren have been out in Silverstone. They have been testing their new car. They I don't know if you saw the camo livery that they put on the car. Obviously, we haven't seen the full liveries, the proper cars yet, because that's going to be in the F1 75 event. But I did like the camo paint, actually. I thought, you know what, chuck it on for a race or two. It looks quite nice.
I was actually pretty keen. I was like, this is a nice livery. Then I saw it had no sponsor. I was like, okay, it's definitely not a race livery then. It's a shame. But I did really like it. I always like camo liveries, actually. But that one in particular was nice. Yeah, it's like a
no
leopard
sponsors couldn't be McLaren, definitely that. But no, spirits at McLaren seem quite high, and obviously why wouldn't they be? They've just come off the back of a constructors title, so obviously they're going to be feeling pretty good about the season. But early kind of rumblings from McLaren, both internally and externally, seem to be that they're going to have a really competitive package. I believe it was Zach Brown and Lando that said that they believe they've made quite big gains on last year's car. Obviously, everyone makes gains on last year's car. That's not really a new thing. But it's quite interesting. It does get me quite excited already for the season, especially that Lando then also came out and did an interview talking about a potential title fight with Max Verstappen, which I'm sure we would all like to see. And talking about Max's driving style, him being quite an aggressive driver, and the fact that he didn't need to do anything special to beat Max. It kind of sounded like fighting talk, and it sounded like almost like he was disrespecting him, which obviously he wasn't. They're good friends. We know that. But I found it quite interesting that Lando was just like, look, all I need to do is drive smart. If I'm in front of him, then I'm in the best position. And we know we know how aggressive Max is. Lando basically said last season, Max got himself in a position where, because he had that start we just mentioned, he had the dominant start to last season. It meant that because he was always ahead, he could take those risks defending and force Lando to, back out and get a bit intimidated in some situations. Lando's basically just come out now and said, you know what, I need to do that next season. If I'm ahead, I can be the one that can kind of intimidate him and put him under pressure. So
it was almost more than that, wasn't it? He was almost saying, like, he didn't directly say it, but the vibe I got from what he said was that essentially Max could just crash them both out and Max would benefit because it was Lando that needs to gain, whereas Max could have just kept his lead because he had a decent lead. So it was quite spicy comments. I mean, those two do share Max's private jet out to every race, which I'm always surprised at, especially when they have, you know, particularly spicy races last season. Then you just imagine just hop on the same jet and get into their gym jams together and, you know, chilling, have some marshmallows if that's what you do on a private jet. Max has also got a new private jet as well. Did you see this? He just upgraded his jet. So things are hard in the Verstappen household, clearly. But
I like to think that if you got a private jet, you'd be there eating marshmallows on it. It's a funny image.
Get the open fire on. That's how they work, isn't it? You can have an open fire in a private jet. So in terms of McLaren's car, they have apparently been quite aggressive, and we did see it for the first time with the shakedown at Silverstone, as you said. Obviously, it's always hard to judge at what state that car is in. We know it's not the final livery. There was a couple new interesting elements to it. Interestingly, it looked like they were running different front wing end plates on each side of the car. So the left-hand side had one style, the right-hand side had another style, which is quite unusual, but I'm sure just testing both. And then also they had different side pods. It looks like they've got almost to the Mercedes failed side pods from a couple of seasons ago, which sort of Red Bull sort of went towards as well. It's interesting. And yeah, it certainly doesn't look like at a glance they've just done a very, you know, natural evolution of last year's car. It does look like they've done some changes, and they are, as you said, doing some fighting talk. So they obviously felt like they needed to. They felt like even though they were the fastest car for most of last season, they obviously felt like they need to make some changes. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see. And I got to say, on Lando, I do think he's right. He does need to get his elbows out more. I think he wasn't world champion material last season. Straight up, he just wasn't good enough. He did. I worked it out based on, what did I base it on? I think I based it on qualifying. I might have even based it on race. I can't remember. Anyway, I can't remember the numbers now, but I worked it out last season. And basically, McLaren did have a faster car for more races than Red Bull did. Obviously, Red Bull were dominant in the beginning, which helps. But in terms of number of races, McLaren just about edged out Red Bull. So Lando should have been close to Max than he was. Yeah, okay. It always helps when you've got, you know, a bit of a dud in the second seat, should we say, which maybe Max won't have this year. But he just wasn't good enough to win the championship last season, so he's got to up his game.
When Red Bull were the dominant car, I think it was up till Miami that changed. I think Max had around about a 50-point lead, and he won the championship with over 60 points. So exactly, like, even when McLaren had the best car, Max still slightly pulled away. And you know, the drive in Brazil last season was a perfect example, I feel, of the difference between both of them, where Max was just able to not just be rapid in the wet, but just make calculated, smart moves under that pressure in those conditions and be still, you know, assert himself on track. So, completely agree. Lando needs to get his elbows out. He said that himself as well. So are we going to see new Lando Norris? Kind of excites me to hope, to think that maybe he starts implementing a little bit of Max's overtaking style potentially. I don't know. I'm excited for it, though. I hope that Max also gets a good car. Nobody wants to see McLaren run away with it as much as we didn't want to see Red Bull run away with it for want of a good fight up front. So I would love to see that. Yeah,
I mean, the Flexiwings thing aside, I do think we've got a good chance of having like 4 cars in contention. So it could be an exciting season. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you think Lando needs to get his elbows out more? I mean, he definitely needs to drive better than he did last season overall. But like, I don't feel like there was many times where there was one. Okay, at the starts, yes. At the starts, he needs to get his elbows out more. Other than that, I felt like he was mostly quite calculated. He did go for some moves when he needed to. He was more cautious when he needed to. Max, honestly, is just, I'm going to say lucky. It's not luck, but Max is almost lucky that people do tend to jump out of his way, because Max should be involved in more incidents than he is. But because everyone knows he's got pretty much the fastest car, they don't fight him too hard.
I disagree. I understand what you're saying, but I disagree that that's luck, because Max has kind of created that intimidation himself. He has created that. Like, fine if he's reaping the rewards of that now, okay, fair play, but he burst on the scene and he has driven like this since day one. He was criticized for it for years, for the Vettel with China at the hairpin and all the incidents that he did get involved with in the early stages of his career, where he was just being overly aggressive and miscalculating it. Now he's basically got the same aggression, but it's more calculated, and other drivers know that, and they're like, I don't want to cause damage to my car, or maybe it's someone where their seat is a bit more in danger than Max is, and they're like, you know what, I don't want to crash. I'll, have it, fine. And I completely agree. There's definitely different treatment shown to Max on track, but I think that's purely down to him earning that himself, and maybe Lando needs to start doing that as well. Maybe that's part of getting the elbows out, not just on Max, but just in general, just to be a bit more. We saw about Piastri and Lando, how they worked together throughout the season, and obviously in Hungary when Lando gave Piastri the position back and gave him the win effectively, which he deserved, by the way. But anyway, it's just a point of, it's interesting that the dynamic suits Max, but he's also created that dynamic himself, which Lando hasn't.
Yeah, I do agree, which is why I said I kind of hesitate to call it luck, because it's not just luck. But like it should go wrong for him more often than it does. But you're right, he's created a situation that allows him to get away with it a lot. But I just think if Lando starts doing the same thing, they're just going to crash more. And Lando needs to outsmart Max. If you just match Max's aggression, they're literally just going to crash more. That's it. And sometimes it will go your way, sometimes it won't go your way. But you're putting yourself at 50-50. If you're smarter about it though, and you go for moves when you need to go for them, but don't when you don't, I think that's a much better way to be. I think actually Carlos Sainz, I reckon, absolutely nails the level of aggression. Some of the moves he pulls off are outrageous, and you're like, holy hell, that was beautiful, like fair play. Was it in Mexico? Was it Max he overtook? It just like surprised him on like lap 2. And Max didn't think he was going to go for it. He just launched it down his inside and got the move done. It was like, whoa, where did that come from? Fair play, Carlos. But then equally, he doesn't crash very often. He doesn't very often misjudge moves, to be honest. I mean, one that springs to mind is Baku last season against Perez, where they both ended up in the wall. But I felt like that was pretty much a 50-50 racing incident. I don't think Carlos was being aggressive then. It was just one of those things. Neither wanted to give an inch and they end up in the wall. But I feel like Carlos nails it, and I don't think Lando needs to be much more aggressive. I think if he matches Max, I think that's a bad thing, not a good thing. What do you reckon?
Yeah, just on the Carlos Sainz now. I know it's a slightly off topic, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. I do think he's the most underrated driver on the grid. I've personally been saying that for a while.
100%.
I think it's taken him going from Ferrari to Williams for people to realise what Ferrari are going to miss out on. Not, of course, taking anything away from Hamilton going to Ferrari, but Sainz is a top class driver. I completely agree. He's been so good, and everyone was raving about Leclerc, and then Sainz kind of comes along and just is pretty much there for him. Okay, maybe not quite on the 1 lap pace, but multiple races outscoring Leclerc, and Sainz is a brilliant driver. I do think he's the most underrated on the grid.
I was going to put it out there. I think I rate Sainz higher than Leclerc. I know that's a controversial opinion because Leclerc tends to outscore Sainz, and there is a reason for that, and I am very aware of that. I just think I completely agree. I've been saying the exact same things, that Sainz is really underrated. I honestly think he's fantastic, and honestly, it makes me want to be a Williams ambassador now he's at Williams, because they've got such a great pairing. They've got Sainz and Albon. They've also got James Vowles heading up the team now. I think Williams are now finally on their way back to the front. It might be a while. I think Williams are more likely to get to the front now than Alpine. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they win a race before Alpine wins a race, or regularly win races before Alpine wins a race. But a little bit off topic there. But I really rate Sainz. I rate him very, very highly. Maybe too highly.
There you go, guys. Alex Gillen is a Sainz fanboy, confirmed.
Yeah, don't mind it. It's fine.
All right, so I guess moving on to the next talking point. We've obviously had some TV exclusive deals announced recently. Do you want to kind of tell us what you found on that, Alex?
Yeah, so it's not that much of an announcement. It's more triggered by a rumour. So the rumour is that Netflix are considering making a move for the US deal to show F1, obviously on Netflix. It's currently run by ESPN, and they pretty much take the UK Sky F1 coverage and pretty much show a lot of that. But I mean, I think this would be good for America. I mean, look what Drive to Survive's done. Netflix has got a ginormous platform. If they was to include it with a Netflix subscription, that's just going to, F1 needs to go less pay TV and more free to air. And Netflix, although it's not free to air, for like £9 a month, if you're getting all of that TV and F1, like, it's such a good deal. It may be a separate pay package if they do it. I've got no idea, but big talking point.
Alex, I cannot, honestly, and you must agree with me here, I cannot stress enough. Every time I hear of these kind of rumours or things happening in other countries, as a UK F1 consumer, I die inside every time I hear these kind of things. Like I pray that we weren't locked into an expensive whole package where we had to have everything else. And I'd love to have F1 TV at the prices you're mentioning. Like, honestly, US customers, if this happens, of course, it's only a rumor, but yeah, you're lucky.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the point, is it's triggered a wider conversation of pay TV. I think stuff can only be on pay TV for so long. You know, pay TV does decrease the interest in the sport, I think, particularly an international sport like F1. I think football is, you know, obviously it's a very different level to F1. You know, so many football fans. I know you're one, GB. Personally, I'm not, but I get it. Fine. We don't have to agree on everything. But yes, but like obviously in the UK at least, like, it's a UK, we're talking about the Premier League, it's, you know, there's so many teams in the UK, you've got a local team, you can go to matches, you know, all your mates are talking about it as well, so that kind of is able to survive. I think F1 has really shot itself in the foot longer term by going on pay TV. I think it made sense when they did, because it was quite big at the time, and I think now they could do with doing something a bit different. And apparently this Sky deal in the UK runs till 2029, unfortunately, so we've got a little bit of time. Honestly, for me, I wouldn't hate it if it stayed on Sky, but I think we need F1 TV. And to me, Sky shouldn't be afraid of that. Because, yes, okay, it's a competitor, but it's not a competitor directly to them. It's not TNT Sports, or it's not BBC or ITV or whoever it may be. It's not a direct competitor. It's not a broadcast channel. It's just subscribing directly to Formula One themselves. It's a lot cheaper, but also the coverage is very different. Sky does do fantastic coverage, and I don't think they should be scared of a bit of competition. I think exclusivity deals, they just get rid of all competition. And I don't think Sky are necessarily resting on their laurels. I think Sky do a good job with it. It just, the main problem is the price, honestly. I mean, me personally, I only watch F1, MotoGP, which is not on Sky or any of those channels. It is on TNT. And then like snooker, like bit of Six Nations, most of it's on the BBC. So like for me, I'm not paying 30 odd quid a month for just F1. And their obviously idea is, but you get the cricket and you get the F1 football. I personally don't want it. So reduce it to F1 TV prices of 10 quid a month, maybe, and I'll pay it. Yeah,
and look, like, I do miss it, the costing, absolutely, but I also miss the extra interaction you get on F1 TV. I know Sky, and I don't know if this is a personal problem that I have, but I pay for the top level package with Sky currently. I want to watch the onboard footage. Like when Crofty says for the millionth time, your Sky Glass customers, blah, 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 you know, I try and get up all the different feeds of, you know, if there's Verstappen on his hot lap and he's gone purple in sector 1 and I want to watch his onboard or something, I want to have the freedom to go and look at the other POVs, to look at data, to look at some sector statistics, not just the main feed of, say, Crofty and whoever else is talking. So F1 TV gives you that. I've used it before. It's a brilliant service. Sky, I think, is supposed to give you that with the onboards, but I still, to this day, have never been able to get it working where I can just have multiple feeds. It is just pay loads of money a month. Here's your main feed. That is it. And it might work for football, because as you say, I am a football fan, and that does work for football, fine. But Formula One is different. We've got 20 different cars going around. We've got so many, you know, we haven't got teams. We do have teams, but the focus is on the drivers, and there's so many different drivers on the grid that we want to see all those different POVs, all those different statistics. And I completely agree. Please give us F1 TV in the UK alongside Sky. Fine, we'll have both. Great. But I do agree. We need F1 TV. It's so long overdue. We need the extra data and everything that comes with it.
I actually think it's not even just the data, because I do agree with you, but correct me if I'm wrong here, and I think this must be a licensing agreement. If you miss the race on Sky, so you don't record it to your box or whatever, and you miss the race, and the race is finished, you can't just go in and restart the program from the beginning. You can't watch it back on demand. Am I right?
Oh, good question.
I think that's correct. I think you have to have recorded it, or they do replay it, obviously, and maybe a few hours later they will replay it on the Sky F1 channel. And this must be some sort of agreement with F1 that they're not allowed to have it on demand. Whereas, like MotoGP, for example, I subscribe directly to MotoGP, I pay, it's actually not that cheap. I can't remember what I pay now, about 200 euros a year, maybe a bit more than that. It's not that cheap, but I can join middle of a MotoGP race and just rewind to the beginning once it's finished. And actually, there is a bit of a delay. To be fair, I do wish they'd shorten the delay. Between the broadcast finishing, there's normally about an hour or two before it's available on demand. But still, ignoring that delay, it's then available immediately. I can go back and watch any moment the second I want to, which, I mean... Of course, it's 2025. Like, obviously, you can go back and watch something on demand. And the fact you can't on Sky, and I may be wrong on this, please do correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe you can watch F1 on demand on Sky, only on the channel. Yes,
you're right. So you, unless you've hit record, so I have had this actually, I was just racking my brains while you were speaking then, and I have had it where I've been out, I've come back and I've been like, oh no, I've forgotten to hit record on it, and then I've got to join from lap 20 and I've missed an amazing start to the race. And now I know what's happened. So, yeah, exactly. And then, again, we keep coming back to it. But when you're paying that price, you expect to at least be able to have the freedom to move around in the live broadcast. It's quite incredible how restricted we are on the F1 side, despite that. What I say is roll back the days, bring back Channel 4 and BBC and give us all free F1 viewing, please.
They need to do something like that, don't they? I don't know what it would be. I mean... Maybe ad supported. Like the problem is obviously Sky. The reason they want exclusivity is because they want you to pay 30 quid a month for F1, which if you're into football and whatever else, it potentially is worth it. But I could be wrong on this, but I feel like a lot of F1 fans aren't that into other sports. I think F1 is just different to a lot of other sports. I mean, a lot of the other sports on the channel is right are ball-based sports. I know that's a massive generalisation. I know if it's not the ball that you support, so you like all violent football. I also like cricket, and I also like all these other sports. I know that's not quite how it works, but still, I think there is more crossover there. I mean, look, okay, take football and cricket. They are both ball-based. They're both one team against the other. They're both on the same pitch. There's definitely similarities there, whereas F1 is just so completely different that I do feel like there's not much crossover from F1 fans to other sports. Obviously, there's some. Football's so big, there's going to be crossover. But I feel like, I don't know, probably approaching like almost half of F1 fans probably aren't necessarily fans of many other sports.
I think it's a question for the listeners, really. Like, I guess back to the point is, even if you're in a country where you've already got F1 TV at what you think is a really reasonable price, I guess if there were proposals to change that, what would your preference be? If you're in the UK, would you prefer to move on to a cheaper F1 TV style service? I agree. I'm not asking for it to be free. That was a joke. As much as I wouldn't be against that, I'm certainly never expecting that to happen again, at least in the UK with F1. But absolutely, I don't mind paying for a good product. I don't mind paying for a refined service where I can watch it how I want to watch. And to be honest, you could get me talking about for hours on this for football. That's a whole different topic. Because, anyway, you pay a lot for that and you only get one service and whatever, fine. At least with F1, we get every race, but now expand it. Give us the drivers, give us all the other, everything else outside of it that you do get with F1 TV at a lower price. My vote would definitely be to move to that system. I would be like, if we add F1 TV as well as Sky TV, I think maybe that's being greedy to ask for that. I don't know, but I would rather us move to F1 TV than stick with the current Sky arrangement.
I agree. One final point on this is there's no need to be exclusive anymore. There's no need to sign an expensive deal. Obviously, F1 wants the money and the platforms want exclusivity. I get that side of it. But other than that, I mean, these days you don't have to send a team out to the track. You can host F1 coverage for pretty damn cheap. You can have a team that's just in the UK, comment. I mean, literally, if F1 gave me the rights right now, I could take their feed and restream it on Twitch and add some commentary on top. I could host an F1 thing. I could do a pre-show and a post-show. Obviously, it'd be nowhere near as good as Sky. But do you see what I mean? Is these days you can host, you could show F1 for very, very cheap. So there's no reason in theory other than the need, the want for these platforms to be exclusive, where we can have multiple. We could have BBC showing it and ITV showing it and Sky showing it and Netflix showing it. It's theoretically possible that all the platforms could show it because it's relatively low cost. Obviously, different back in the day. My point is different back in the day where you had to send a team out to the tracks. There was a big expense. You're not going to do that if you're going to get 10 viewers. But these days, it doesn't really matter. I don't know. Look, exclusive deals are anti-consumer. We're obviously not going to like them. Obviously, we'd rather be on more platforms. We'd rather it cheaper. We'd rather it free. Obviously. So, that's not really a consideration. It's not going to become multi-platform anytime soon. It's not going to become free anytime soon. We can only dream. But I do agree. Just give us F1 TV as well as an option in the UK. If you're Sky and you think your broadcast is fantastic, you shouldn't be afraid of it. And if you are afraid of it, then, well, that's an issue that needs resolving, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a good summary. And just like to add, I reckon you could host a F1 show. I can do it on your private jet with your marshmallows. Be a vibe.
Because you genuinely could these days with satellite internet and stuff. You genuinely could host it from a plane in the air.
and look, like F1 is doing incredibly at the moment. At least we've had Drive to Survive. We've had a lot of things around Formula One as well. So it's understanding that it's understandable that you've got Netflix and these big names getting involved, and it's obviously exciting as well from a fan perspective to see what that future picture looks like. And of course, that then leads us into the new F1 movie, which is pretty incredible. I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on this, and I understand why the hardcore, loyal Formula One fan might look at this and think, God, Hollywood involved, Brad Pitt's driving a car, come on, what? This is not, cringing at it almost. I have read a lot of these opinions online, but I completely disagree. I love the fact that we've got a sport which, we touched on it last episode when we started watching it, decades ago, centuries ago, back when it was on public TV. And we're now talking about it being a Hollywood movie. Like, it's incredible where it's come from. And, regardless of how this movie, how this movie portrays driving an F1 car, I don't expect it to be realism or anything like that. But I will be there on day one in the cinemas, enjoying the fact that F1 is in the big screens, with Brad Pitt, with the Hollywood influence. I think it's incredible. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, look, Drive to Survive exists, and that is frustrating for me personally as an F1 fan, because it's supposed to be a docuseries, right? Like, it's supposed to be the real story. And they just tell it weird, and they exaggerate, and they get, there's lots of inaccuracies there, and it's frustrating because well, this isn't how it would have been. But that's a docuseries, whereas this isn't. This is fiction, right? This is okay. It's based on F1, and it might not be the most realistic film you've ever seen, but it is fiction. It's not supposed to be the real story of Max Verstappen. So take liberties. Absolutely, it's an F1 movie. Just enjoy it for what it is. There's no need to be like, oh yeah, but this was inaccurate. So what? Watch any program. They're all inaccurate. They all hype things up for the betterment of the show, the betterment of the story. So for me, this is a complete non-issue. What I will say as well on this is that they have got Lewis Hamilton working with them, and apparently he's been working them pretty hard to make it as realistic as possible. He has been actively working on it and basically saying, yeah, no, that wouldn't happen. Do it this way instead. So that should, it's not like they just got creative license to do whatever the hell they want, and it's going to be ridiculously unrealistic. I think it'll be quite realistic, but it's fundamentally a fictional movie, and it's a Hollywood movie, and so what? Who cares if it's not the most real thing you've ever seen?
Yeah, exactly. I think when I say realism as well, I mean more in terms of your Fast and Furious, as where if you're a petrol head listening to this and you've watched Fast and Furious, which I'm sure is every single petrol head ever, you know that the car sounds aren't realistic. The shift sounds are, all the kind of sounds are just all like quite artificial, aren't they? To kind of like hook the viewer into and make it sound a bit more sexy but
it's
that's
still a good film. As a car person, you can still enjoy that, right?
Absolutely. But then, as you said, they've got Lewis working on it, but then they've also been to Grand Prix. We saw there was a video going around. I remember watching on Twitter of Brad Pitt doing something on a I forget what it's called now, just a mat on the floor, just a crash mat with cameras all around, and that was on the Vegas start-finish grid. And clearly they're doing stuff at Grand Prix. We've seen it already at Silverstone, so we know that it's going to actually be there at venues and stuff. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what the kind of Hollywood spin of F1 behind the scenes is going to look like, and whatever story that comes with it as well.
Yeah, you're right. It is going to be that. Yeah. I completely agree. The Hollywood spin is going to be interesting. I think as well, just on the trailer in particular, I mean, I did watch it just before this, but, it's not worth us analysing because honestly, I believe it was a Super Bowl trailer. And I think if you didn't know the F1 movie existed, you might be like, oh, this looks cool. Like, oh, as an F1 fan, I didn't know this was coming, but obviously we've been known it's been coming for ages. As you said, they've been filming at lots and lots of races. They filmed at Silverstone, Abu Dhabi, Vegas, a few others as well. So yeah, they've been doing a lot. We knew it was going to happen. I don't think there's a lot in the trailer that we can really take out. I mean, there's a few little tidbits here and there, but like I don't think we need to overanalyze it. It was just a hype building trailer. There was no real story. The one thing was, it was cool to see some sort of final shots of how it's going to look in terms of like the various moments and stuff, because obviously we've only seen literal real life shots so far. We haven't seen any edited with effects and stuff. So it was kind of cool to see that. And to me, yeah, from what I've seen so far, it looks good, but it was just a very short teaser trailer.
For me, I feel like expectations going into it is almost like Drive to Survive. Like watching Drive to Survive as a hardcore Formula One fan, I know, and this is quite topical as well, because we know it's coming in a couple of weeks. I know when the new Drive to Survive season hits, I know that it's just going to focus on drama and emphasize things behind the scenes, which, let's be honest, weren't as blown up as they were in real life. We've seen that before in previous Drive to Survive seasons, but that's fine. Dramatize it. We always hear about casuals coming to Formula One as a result of these kind of things, and while some might criticize that, I love it. I love having casual fans in the sport. I want it to reach as many people as possible, and I think you'd be pretty crazy to kind of ridicule people for liking something just because they watched it on a series. Oh, you like it? Like, why does that make it any different from someone that's followed it for 20 years just because they know less? So I'm really looking forward to this movie hitting cinemas and hopefully hitting as many people as possible and bringing in even more fans to the sport. So yeah, I'm kind of approaching it in the same way as Drive to Survive.
You've upset me now, GB. You just made me realise that as part of this podcast, I'm going to have to actually watch Drive to Survive this year, aren't I? I don't want to. Do you know what? I've never got through a full season of Drive to Survive. Not a single one. Not even episode of season 1. Nothing like that. I've always watched it for the first, maybe, 10 episodes, something like that. I've tended to watch like 6 or 7. I think last season I got through about 2. I just can't get through it. As a hardcore F1 fan, I just cannot get through it. But I guess I'll have to get through at least some of it for this podcast this year.
Yeah. No, and look, I agree. Like I will say, I did sit down trying to watch the last season and didn't finish half of it. So fine, like I get that. But I think it's just more appreciating what it brings, because it's Drive to Survive has done so agree. Well. And there are parts I love. Like I love the parts of Drive to Survive when they, for example, the one is going back a few seasons, but the episode I was cracking up where they were going behind the scenes with Yuki Tsunoda's routine, and he was talking about food all the time and stuff that he actually does talk about because he says it in interviews and all this kind of stuff. And we actually got a good insight on what happens in the drivers' everyday lives and their training routines and stuff, which I thought was really cool. I don't care so much about the dramatized stuff, which both of us and most of the listeners as well will obviously know on a day-to-day that didn't really happen, and it probably was a bit blown up and dramatized. But yeah, I mean, fine. That stuff aside, I do still like the other kind of light it brings to F1 at least.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it is important for F1. I do think it's fantastic, especially as F1's on pay TV these days. I actually think it's a really fantastic way to reach that new audience and to get an audience interested, because although it's not free, it's included with millions and millions of people's subscriptions. I think it's a great shortcut. If you're not going to put F1 on free TV, it's a great shortcut to almost do that instead.
And we've spoken about reaching casual fans as well and a different audience. On a slightly different note, and this is kind of our off-topic segment of this podcast, F1 Esports is on at the moment. Event 2 has finished on the day that we are recording this. We've had race 4 of Event 2 finished. Again, another avenue into Formula 1 for casuals that might come across F1 Esports and wonder how on earth does this compare to what it's like in the real car. Very different on the game. They, of course, drive on F1 24 as we create content as well. I've been loving it, though. I've been absolutely loving F1 Esports because unlike in real F1 cars, for those who didn't know, F1 Esports is set to equal car performance. So there is absolutely no advantage of whatever car you sit in. Dirty air and elements such as that that you would experience in real life are dialed down. So essentially, cars can follow very close. And what it's led to, in my opinion, is so far the best season of F1 Esports that I have watched. I've been loving it. What's been your thoughts of it?
Yeah, it is a fantastic season. We've got an unbelievably close championship. I do agree. It's been a fantastic season. I don't know. For some reason, though, and I think I've pretty much always found this with F1 Esports, it doesn't grab me like real F1 does. And like, surely I'm the prime candidate for it, right? Like, I play the F1 game. My career is around the F1 game effectively. I've met a handful of drivers. I know a lot of the behind the scenes. Like, I should be the perfect person that's like, can't wait for the next race. But I'm not like that with F1 Esports. Like, I do watch it and I do enjoy it. But for some reason, it hasn't grabbed me in. I don't know if that's a me issue or if that's a F1 Esports issue. For example, I very rarely watch other people play the F1 game as well. Maybe it's just a burnout thing on my part. I don't know. But the interesting bit there that I'm not massively into it. But yeah, I do agree. I think they've done a really good job for the most part this season. It's not been perfect. Some of the penalties and stuff have been a bit wild. Also, they were unannounced at first, and now they started announcing it, which is good. And I think the first half of the race always tends to be a bit dull, but I think that's kind of the nature of it.
Am I right in saying that they started announcing the penalties because of a tweet that you put out, or did you put something together on that?
Yeah, we'll say that. No, I don't like claiming things like that, just because like it might just be coincidence. It's so big-headed to be like, yes, it's because of me that they started doing it. But I did put out a tweet, yes, the day before, kind of slating them, but also, saying like, but also here's a sheet which that I've put together which shows all the penalties and stuff. I also was messaging the people that involved with the show, saying like, you guys should really, show all the penalties. Yeah, I think I was involved in that, but they may have done it without me. Who knows? Yeah,
because I think they put your tweet, or they put a link like in I think it was a Twitch chat of F1, something like that. They put it somewhere where F1 on the main F1 feed, everyone could see it, which is really cool. I mean, it kind of also goes to show that they've acknowledged that they were clearly lacking that.
Yeah, I think all they did was on their Twitch this week when they were live showing the show, I think they put a link to the sheet that I've created. So it's championship standings, it's full race results, and it's a log of all the penalties. So it's basically all the info hopefully you could want. So yeah, that was quite cool. And as you said, it shows that perhaps it's a bit missing sometimes. Like they haven't even always posted after the races, the standings and stuff, like on Instagram or whatever. It's a bit weird. There's definitely a few oddities there. And there's definitely some weird stuff going behind the scenes as well. I think it's important to talk about this. If you go to f1esports.com right now, and we are now 2/3 of the way through the F1 Esports season, it doesn't show anything about this season. It only talks about last season. It says about the winner of the last event. It shows the standings from last season. It's as if this season isn't happening. f1esports.com is as if this season of F1 Esports isn't happening. But this is definitely some struggles behind the scenes. I've looked into this and I can't find any concrete evidence. But what I will say is I know EA ran the F1 Esports website sort of unofficially. And by unofficially, I mean it wasn't like EA's website. It was I'm not going to mention any names, but a prominent employee within EA that ran the website on behalf of EA, but it wasn't actually an EA-owned site, if that makes sense. And basically, because that's not been updated, that says to me that he no longer works there, or there's some sort of dispute, or it's definitely strange, because there's no way you'd want f1esports.com not being updated with all the stuff. Like, that would never be a thing. So clearly there's something going on behind the scenes there. I don't know what it is. It's definitely a bit fishy. What I will say as well, though, I think in this forum is a good place to say it. EA aren't actually really that involved in F1 Esports. I think most people assume that EA almost run F1 Esports. They don't. EA are barely involved in F1 Esports. I think probably this year, the extent of their involvement is they do produce a custom build of the game, so a custom version of the game for esports that has certain tweaks. Things like, last season they were able to throw a safety car at will, which is something I really wish we had. I noticed also, for example, it stops them taking penalties in the pit lane. So if they get a 5-second penalty, normally in the game, you then take that in your next pit stops. They've stopped that just so that then obviously the teams can appeal the penalty afterwards, so they haven't already taken it. Little things like that. That they tweak in the game. They've also changed the handling slightly actually this year, which is a bit of a strange one, but normally it's the more small tweaks. So they do that for them. But other than that, they don't do a lot. Previously, they helped a bit with the broadcast. They may have someone on the ground to help with any game issues, same as they'd also have probably someone from Fanatec to help with any hardware issues. But yeah, for the most part, they're not involved. They don't run it. They don't publish it. They don't promote it. Although it's good promotion for their game, they're not really that involved. And I do wonder, one final point from me, GB, sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I do wonder, they did actually vie for the license to run it, but they didn't get it. I can't remember which company got it, but a different company got it. It went from Gfinity to somebody else, which is why it's now hosted in Sweden. But EA went for it and didn't get it. So I wonder now if things have come to a head, if it's not just this one person that's got some issues that I was talking about running the F1 Esports website, if possibly it's just a case of EA going, we don't want anything to do with you. There was a rumor a while ago that EA were basically pulling out of F1 Esports, but I'm not aware that they have to have permission from EA to do it, especially as it's F1 running it.
I love how we went from talking about the esports event and enjoying the race to now we're talking about
get me the drama.
People pulling out of mate, you should have given me a heads up. I would have brought the tinfoil with me. I actually hadn't heard that last point you mentioned, so that's quite interesting. There's definitely a lot of uncertainty around it at the moment and stuff going on behind the scenes. So I'm biased, obviously. I'm with Aston Martin, so I'm hoping the best for everyone involved with esports. But just a point on the competitiveness of the series, because I kind of wanted to touch on this. F1 24, for those who haven't played the game, gets a lot of criticism this year mainly around the physics, as well as the many bugs that the game is unfortunately played with as well. So the game has its own issues. Alex has already touched on how the changes that they've made for the esports build, if you want to call it that, that only the esports drivers will use for these events. And despite all of the criticism of the game, which I don't disagree with, I definitely agree with a lot of the things that the flaws that this current year game has. I maintain it. This so far, every race, like qualifying, if almost doesn't matter, to the point where if you're top 10 almost, you've got a chance of winning the race. The drivers stay so close. Strategies are so important with the tyre changes this year. And every race we've had, I was trying to think just then while you were talking, have we had a boring race in esports so far? I don't think we have. I think maybe the race with the least amount of overtakes might have been Zandvoort, but then Zandvoort, was yesterday, round, I think it was round 2 of event 2. And that had loads of changing strategies in, which made it really interesting. So yeah, it's quite interesting, really. It goes to show that all the community kind of outcry and negatives and criticism of the game, which, again, justified, fine, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad experience of driving, which the esports drivers are at least proving that they can make it a fun spectacle. I suppose that's what I should say, is people would disagree with me saying bad experience of driving. That's kind of the point of it. But to watch as a viewer, it's entertaining.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to say, is I agree. I think the changes made this year possibly do make it, and probably do make it, better to watch. But I think not better to play, not better to drive. I think, the esports drivers moaned so much about the handling this year. They clearly can follow closer. One we can hone in on is the ERS changes this year. So where previously from last year and the years before that, your ERS basically took multiple laps to charge. Like you just couldn't recharge it quickly. Probably to go from 0 to 100% charge on a typical track would probably take something like 4 or 5 laps, like quite a long time. Whereas now you can recharge, you can do that in one sector. I'm not exaggerating. You can do that in one sector on certain tracks, definitely within a lap. So massive, massive changes. I think as a driver, I think that's worse, because it's not strategic anymore. You can't push somebody and make them burn their battery, and once you've made them burn their battery, they've now got to recharge for the next 4 or 5 laps, while you can, if you've been smart, you can hold on to your battery and you can now use that to overtake. It made it really tactical and really interesting. That's now gone. Someone can switch off the battery and recharge in a sector. Well, it means it's the same every single lap, and everyone can always burn their battery down every single overtaking straight or whatever. So from a driver's point of view, I think that's a bad thing. But I agree. From a spectator's point of view, actually, I think it's turned out to be a good thing, because although that is a thing in real life to some extent, I think it's kind of weird if it's like, well, they had this big battle and suddenly this guy just blasts straight past him. That's kind of weird. It makes sense as a driver because you know about battery charge levels, but as a casual viewer, you don't know any of that. So actually what this change has done is meant it's the same every single lap. If someone can't get close down the straight, they can't get close down the straight for the whole race, because the recharge levels, they're maintaining the charge every lap, because it's effectively a 1 lap cycle now of ERS, rather than previously maybe it might have been a 5 lap cycle.
Yeah, I think I agree with this. The definitely comparing last year, spot on. I do think though that when you look at the closing stages of races in the F1 game, if there is still an element of you can badly manage your battery. If you don't manage it correctly on the penultimate lap and you put the other car all over you, you can lose out as a result of it. And again, that's kind of a different point and a wider issue of, DRS and slipstream with the car behind on the penultimate lap. But battery side of things, I still do think you can get punished. We've seen it in the series we create, the We Compete in Creator Series. We do see drivers that get punished every now and again for lack of battery management, even though your point is spot on, and it definitely is a lot easier to do that. People get away with it much more this year from having bad management. But you do still see people struggling versus others in certain moments. And I think, I could be wrong here, but I think Thomas Ronhaar versus Barry Burremand at USA, the final race, which again was tonight, the time of recording, I believe Thomas had more battery than Barry going onto the final lap. I know Thomas also had slightly better tyres, but Barry knew normally when you're the car in P2 going onto the final lap, you're normally loving life. Because the DRS and slipstream is so significant that you're kind of waiting for that moment to take P1 to take the win on the final lap. But Thomas won the race starting the final lap in P1 because he had slightly better tyres, yes, but then he also managed to have about 90+% battery when it came to the straight. So, I don't know. I still think there's an element of that. It's just quite a long-winded point, but in the end of the day, it's the point I'm making on it is I actually quite like the ERS changes. I think this game, personally, if F1 25 hit, I'd want to see this battery system versus last game's battery system, personally. But yeah. Anyway.
I'm the complete opposite of that. No. I just think we're getting into a bigger talking point here, but just briefly, I think the F1 game is being dumbed down every year. I think since F1 22, which granted was too difficult on traction, they made F1 23 much more easy on traction, so you're less likely to make mistakes there. And then F1 24 has just massively dumbed down the ERS. So it's just every year it's just getting the learning curve, I suppose, the skill difference, whatever the phrase for that is just getting less and less. So where previously, if you were 2/10, 3/10 lap quicker than somebody, you can make them burn their battery down and then eventually be able to get them because you've made them burn it down while you managed to keep yours charged. You can't do that anymore, and it's making everyone closer, but like artificially closer. If you're genuinely a better driver than someone else, you should be able to show that on track, but you just can't. I don't know, there's less opportunity to show that on track. But I do agree, it's still a thing. It's not like the battery thing is non-existent. You can't recharge it in one straight, it's not that bad. It is still a thing for sure, and you're completely right with tonight's race, where Barry Burremand had less battery than Ronhaar, which is why Ronhaar managed to beat him. But I don't know. Personally, I would definitely rather last year's, or at least just a system that allows a bit of a better skill gap is what I was looking for before. A better skill gap for me, I would definitely be more keen to see.
On the topic of F1 Esports, so Alex, you mentioned that you don't tend to watch many streams or whatever, and maybe esports, therefore, you don't tend to keep up with every single race. Moving back into previous years, would you normally watch every esports race?
It's not any different. I probably have watched every single esports race, but my point was, I'm not like, I can't wait for the next race. Whereas like, I'd say actually I'm a bigger fan of MotoGP. I'm into F1. I'm more passionate about F1. But I'm a bigger fan of MotoGP. So I'm genuinely buzzing for this season, for example. I'm genuinely really excited for the next MotoGP race. I don't find that as much about F1, although I am still excited, but I'm not excited for an esports race. But again, that's probably a me thing, because I don't watch people like GB68 on Twitch playing the F1 game either. It bores the hell out of me. No, it doesn't bore the hell out of me, but I'm just not into it. But it may just be that it's my job to play the game. So of course I'm not really excited to watch it, if that makes sense.
You hurt my feelings. I'm in every one of Alex Gillen's F1 streams, so... but no, I love esports. I get a real buzz out of it. Honestly, I like, the worst thing for me is when I'm working and esports is on, and I try and kind of sneak a little lurk stream in the background, which doesn't always work if I've got things going on at work. But so
I should be clear. I do like it. I do enjoy it. It's not a bad. I feel like I've over-egged. Like it almost seems like I don't enjoy it. I have to watch it, but I don't want to watch it. I do. I'm just not excited for it like I would be for something like MotoGP. Actually, before we move on, I've got one more point to pick you up on. You've said in the past, and I think this might be from your buddies at Aston Martin. You've said in the past the F1 game is you've directly said faster to follow. It's better to follow than it is to be on your own. You genuinely think it's an advantage. You are doing faster lap times. I completely disagree with that, because although dirty air is very low in the game, it does still exist. Slipstream also exists, obviously. But we just saw in the Zandvoort race yesterday in F1 Esports how they could not overtake. They could not overtake. Ismail Fassi really went for it on... was that Berman again? And just couldn't overtake. And yes, he was close, but he couldn't do a move. If he was genuinely quicker in the dirty air / slipstream, he would have been able to overtake relatively easily, surely.
I've got to interrupt you here, that this, on the esports build, they've introduced more dirty air. So
have they? Okay.
It's literally a different version to what we play. But you might be right. I mean, that's obviously a different point for a different day. But like, yeah, it's they one thing that was specifically requested, I believe, by the drivers was more dirty air for the esports build, because we know that it's far too easy to follow. The worst thing on the F1 game is that the slipstream, in my opinion at least, is that slipstream is so powerful. It's fine ERS, fine DRS, they all add together, but the biggest problem is the slipstream. You gain so much in slipstream without anything else. The proof is on lap 1 when there's no DRS and no battery usage, and you see how much you gain on the car in front. So yeah, the esports drivers requested that.
In the game, slipstream is nowhere near as powerful as real life. In the game, it's way weaker than real life. It's just that dirty air doesn't exist. So if slipstream is half as powerful as as real life, but then dirty air is only 10% as powerful as real life, and that probably is quite close to the numbers, to be honest. Of course, it's going to feel power compared to that, but actually slipstream is way more powerful than real life. It's interesting.
Yeah, again, listeners, let us know what you think, but I don't think the game should try and imitate that. I don't want there to be so much dirty air that I can't get close to the car in front because it's realistic to real F1. I think I like where the F1 esports drivers went with requesting more dirty air in the game. I think that was the right request. But we can still see, even with that dirty air, they're able to have amazing overtakes, amazing battles, and give us an amazing show. And I think there's a bit of a balance to strike between perfect realism and something which, it still has a bit of realism about it, but is fun to drive and you can still overtake. So, but back to the point anyway, was that for me, for someone that gets a buzz for esports and gets genuinely excited for every qualifying, every race, it's kind of exponentially going up this season. And again, I said it before, I know I'm biased, I know I'm within esports, I guess, but it's not just for the Aston drivers. I'm buzzing for all of them. I was happy for Thomas today to get his win. And yeah, it just makes me even more excited for round 3, which I forget the exact dates, but it's in March. It's not far away. So yeah, it just makes me really excited for that. We've now got a really spicy finale. I think Thomas leads the championship. I don't have the standings up in front of me right now, but it is very close. I know that for sure. So literally, I'm pretty sure down to like 7th or 8th in the championship can win the title in event 3. If they have the kind of round that Ferrari did last season with Barry and Nico getting 1-2s and doing so well. So yeah, it's really exciting. As someone that's a big fan of it, I'm really looking forward to it. So yeah, bring on event 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. End of March is event 3. That'll be the last event. There'll be 4 races there. And yeah, it is. I normally haven't updated my sheet. That sheet I was talking about that I run. I haven't actually updated it before this stream. We pretty much jumped straight on and did the podcast. But it is very, very close. Ron Hard does lead. I know that. And it is very, very close. And that is really, really exciting. So I am looking forward to that. Also on that, by the way, on the fact that we jumped on straight after esports, not entirely true. We may or may not have had about an hour of tech issues again. I say issues. We're trying to improve things as much as possible. So do let us know down in the comments on YouTube if this is any better this week. I've got a new camera, slightly different angle. I'm using the same mic. We're going to work on more improvements again for next week. I think GB's end up running pretty much the same setup, more or less.
Yeah.
But hopefully it's a bit better this week, but we are still working on it. Equally, hopefully, it's not bad quality or anything like that. Obviously we want to try and make it the best quality we can. But do let us know what you think this week, and hopefully next week we can improve again. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, be brutal. If we look terrible, tell us we look terrible. And
wait, not we look terrible. Our videos look terrible. We know we look terrible. We don't need to hear that.
But no, thank you so much, guys. We really appreciate each and every one of you guys listening, watching, whatever platform you're on. Reminder as well, we are on Spotify and Apple Music as well as YouTube. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you are on YouTube, and we'll catch you in the next one for episode 3.